Hi everyone, thanks for joining us and welcome to Gold Coast, a city where everyone is included. For the next hour, we're going to explore some of the things that make the Gold Coast accessible and inclusive for everyone. I'm your host, Julia. I'm the coordinator for the Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Conference in the Asia Pacific, which, if you may or may not have heard, is coming to the Gold Coast on the 28th of April, followed by a virtual event on the 11th of May. It's something we're very excited about, and we thought this was a great opportunity to start exploring what the Gold Coast has to offer. I'd like to start by respectfully acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I am speaking you from today, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and the people of the Yugambeh language region of the Gold Coast, and also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands upon which each of you are calling in from today. I would like to pay my respects to elders both past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people present here today. Sovereignty has never been ceded, it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I would also like to acknowledge our leaders in the disability rights movement who have and still are paving the way for equity. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. We respectfully ask you to please keep your microphones muted. There is a chat function available for you to interact and ask questions during the live stream. It accepts dictation through Dragon Naturally Speaking. We will be taking questions towards the end, and you will be able to ask them in chat or use the raise your hand function, and we will call on you where you will be welcome to turn on your camera and ask a question. Although please feel free to ask questions in the chat box at any time as we are collecting them as they come up. To access live captioning, if you would like to use it, just click the show captions icon CC in the meeting controls toolbar. If you're using a desktop, it's usually somewhere down the bottom. If you are having any issues with either accessing any of the accessibility or just technical in general, please just ask in chat and our producer Manon will assist you. Joining us today is Adam Sheppard, who's a lifelong resident of the Gold Coast, iFly ambassador. Adam's a retired elite wheelchair athlete, mindset coach, personal trainer, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, awards winner, and wheelchair racing coach. We also have Mike Briggs, who's sports development, sales and marketing manager, plus instructor and coach at iFly Gold Coast. And Ranfurly Hockey, who is the group accommodations manager at the Gold Coast Performance Centre. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hello. Great
Right.
to be here.
Mike, just a note, Mike is here. He's having a bit of technical issues with his camera.
Yes, sorry.
Adam, I thought we might start with you. From your perspective, what makes the Gold Coast accessible and inclusive?
We have a relatively flat area to work with, particularly along the waterfront and by our beaches and all that sort of thing, which definitely helps. I think Gold Coasters, by and large, have an attitude of what can we do to make this work for you, rather than this isn't for you, which I think is a really good thing. So yeah, they're the two biggest things, I think. A willingness to change or to accommodate and things like that.
Yeah, and I think attitude takes everything a long way, really.
100%. The great thing about the Gold Coast, I think, is there's a lot of people here with very open minds to accessibility and inclusion. And so with the right guidance and the right push in the right direction, people are really willing here, which is great.
And why is being accessible and inclusive as a city, as opposed to individual businesses, important, do you think?
It's amazing to have businesses that are accessible, but if you only got the businesses that are accessible, that cuts out, it creates issues for things around it, like transport. If you're coming to the Gold Coast for a holiday, transport to and from the places you want to go, restaurants, cafes, iFly, Gold Coast Performance Centre, all those things. So the infrastructure around these things also needs to be accessible, the accommodation, all that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, it takes a whole community really to make something accessible.
100% it does. Yeah, it's kind of, you know, it's going part of the way if you've got accessible businesses but not the means to get the people there, or, you know, the accommodation, or, you know, bits missing like that. It's only sort of part of the way, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're one of the iFly ambassadors for Gold Coast.
Yeah, I am.
Can you share with us maybe a little bit how that came about and how you felt when you first discovered and experienced iFly?
It came about, I met a lady at the time who was the marketing manager for iFly, probably at least 5 years ago, I would say. And we got talking, and it's always been my thing. I was like, I would never jump out of a plane. That's not something you'd ever get me to do. And somehow we got onto that conversation, and she's like, how about iFly? And I'm like, she said, have you done it? And I said, no, I haven't. So next thing you know, I was booked in to do a session at iFly, and the rest is history. I was sort of getting in there as much as I possibly could, and you know, learning how to fly in a tunnel. So.
And was it one of the first times that you found some place that was, you know, so open with their access and inclusion? Like,
the thing that really struck me with iFly was that, like I was saying before, it was the conversation wasn't, this isn't you. It was, what can we do to make this happen for you? And you know, iFly do things in a really unique way. You know, you have the conversation with the instructors before you get in the tunnel, and it's really, what do we need to do to make this happen for you? What specifically can we do to help you? Which is awesome.
and I guess that leads me nicely over to Mike. iFly pretty much has inclusion at the core of its philosophy. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. We're pretty lucky with our product that it is just inherently inclusive, in the sense that, you know, one of our slogans is anyone can fly from the age of 3. And it's just the nature of the activity, which means that we can kind of live up to that statement, which is quite an amazing thing. And it's always been something that has kind of blown my mind, because we often get asked that question about, you know, what have you done to make the product itself inclusive? There's obviously all the building regulation around that, which, because all the iFly facilities are new builds, so they're already built with the lift access and ramp access to the front doors, and all the hallways are the right size, and we've got the left and right hand accessible toilets and all that kind of stuff as well. So in many ways, I think we were just a bit lucky that this industry kind of started quite recently, when all those regulations were already in place. On top of that, really, it just comes down to training the staff about how we might need to accommodate people with certain needs. Yeah, so I think really it's just the activity itself is inherently accessible for anyone.
Yeah, and can you talk a bit more about staff training, because really that can be an absolute key, and something that, you know, it's part of customer service, really.
Yeah, so I think there's 2 aspects to that. So we've got the customer service part of it, and then also the instructors. So from a customer service point of view, I don't have any like official training in my background on, you know, providing kind of any kind of disability awareness training or any of this kind of stuff. But I did learn from, I used to work in a ski slope in Manchester in the UK, and there was a lady there who ran a business that was trying to improve access to ski slopes throughout Europe for people with disabilities. So she was taking people in the sit-down sleds down the indoor slope in Manchester. She would train all the staff in the facility on disability awareness. And what a lot of what I took away from that was to do with people who might be non-verbal, especially people who have cerebral palsy, and understanding that you still need to communicate directly with that customer, even if you know that you're not going to get a response from them. And then you have the carers there who you can look to get the response. So it's just letting staff know that just because somebody isn't able to respond to you doesn't mean that you can't communicate with them. And I think that's probably one of the biggest learning curves that I've had in my life as an employee in like the recreation industry, or whatever you want to call it. So I've just passed those little lessons that I've learned along the way on to the staff that work for us. And also then the instructor point of view, the instructor, you know, we all operate under an International Body Flight Association guidelines with how we train. So then it's just a case of teaching instructors how we can get people who use wheelchairs in and out the tunnel, depending on whether or not they can load bear it all, how much assistance they need with actually getting up from a seating position into the flight chamber and then back out again. And then little nuances like we use hand signals to communicate to our customers because you can't speak in the airflow. So then if you have someone who's visually impaired, we can't use hand signals, so we would use taps. We would tap them on the body. You know, 1 tap means I need you to bend your legs, and 2 taps means I need you to straighten your legs, and just little things like that, really.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And catering to different disabilities is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, you know, it's a learning curve for everyone involved. So yeah, we're lucky we've got great staff who are open to learning more about how they can provide better customer service for more people.
And how have your customers responded to this?
I think Adam would be a great person to ask that question. I think a lot of times the response we get is they just didn't realize this was a possibility. At no point did indoor skydiving come into this person's mind when they thought, oh, what can I do for a bit of fun on a weekend? So all we're trying to do is just get that message out there that this is something that anybody can do. Yeah, we do have certain restrictions, like we have a weight limit and a couple of other things which, you know, affect all customers. It doesn't matter if you're living with a disability or not. Yeah, as long as you meet that weight limit, then there is a pretty good chance that we'll be able to fly you.
And what have been some of the challenges that you've been able to problem solve?
I think I touched on a few of them, like, you know, people who use wheelchairs. What's the most comfortable way to get them in and out of the airflow, depending on how much mobility they do have. Training the staff to identify how much assistance a customer need based on the type of wheelchair they have as well. Like if they've got, you know, a low back wheelchair with the cambered wheels, then there's a good chance they've got a lot of upper body movement. If they have a high wheelchair with like a headrest, then they're probably going to need a bit more assistance. The visual impairment, you know, how do we replace hand signals for that person? So kind of solve that problem. We do have a harness as well, where if somebody has paralysis from the chest or the waist or the hips down, we can put them into a harness which will actually keep their legs in a straightened position, which means that we'll be able to get a better flight experience for them. And the other thing as well was the suits. All our customers wear essentially a glorified onesie, and it's got one zip up the front. It can be quite awkward to get certain customers into that suit, especially if they've got cerebral palsy. So I'm not sure what the correct terminology is, but when the body's a little bit kind of contorted, it can be hard to get a customer into that one-piece flight suit. So we've got these suits that have 2 zippers down the whole length of the suit, all the way to the feet. So you can pretty much open the whole suit and lie the customer in a suit and then close it back up. Yeah, that was probably the only, we're quite lucky that they're really the only challenges we had to overcome.
And can you give us some insight into how improving your accessibility inclusion has benefited the business?
I think, again, going back to that slogan we have of anyone can fly, I think when people see, Adam and Natasha flying in our wind tunnel, I think that helps back up that statement. So when a parent might be wondering if their 6-year-old child should give it a go or not, and then we can say, hey, we fly anybody. Like, we even fly, people who can't walk or people who can't see or whatever it may be. I think it really does add to that statement of, yeah, anybody can fly.
Yeah, that's great. Ranfurly, we've left you sitting there for a while. We'll turn to you now. Can you talk to us a bit about the journey Gold Coast Performance Centre has been on with accessibility and inclusion and why it's important from the centre's point of view?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Julia, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on this webinar on behalf of the Gold Coast Performance Centre. It's actually great seeing Adam involved. He's part of the GCPC family and a bit of a legend on site here. So he probably knows the centre probably better than me. And, when we could talk about journey, we, in terms of inclusion and accessibility, Adam's actually been a part of it, and Tash, they've run inclusion accessibility workshops for us and training, and most of the staff on site are able-bodied. So to have people like Adam and Tash to discuss how we can better support accessibility and inclusiveness is very important to us. Before I go in a bit more depth on the journey, just those who are not familiar with the Gold Coast Performance Centre, and just how diverse our facilities are, I guess, and the different users that we do have on site, which will show why accessibility and I guess inclusion is very important to us. But bit of background history, the centre is originally built for the 2000 Olympics in terms of a training facility for those in preparation for the Olympics, and since then it's been a bit of a legacy for those in the community. It's not just a high performance centre, it's open to the community, from your grassroots up to your elite. So we cater for many different people. In terms of capacity on the centre, we get over 200,000 people visiting here a year or in and out of the centre. 15,000 people sleeping in our accommodation quarters here. 2,800 members, through our membership base. We have 20 to 30,000 people coming to events that are hosted on site at the centre, and around 9,000 to 10,000 who actually, school groups go through our education program. We have a principal who runs that program. So you can see we do have quite a lot of different users that come to the centre. So I guess for us, it's about providing opportunity to access those facilities and services, and we work a lot closely with our stakeholders like Adam, the different people, users of the facility, on how we can better provide from an inclusive point of view and accessibility throughout the centre. So it's very important for us to ensure all those users, whether they're with accommodation or our members, can have the opportunity to access our facilities and services here. For example, even with our students who come on camp, we make sure our programs are adapted to cater for those kids who might be wheelchair bound or have an impairment, or physical or whatever it is. We try and make sure we have an inclusive program and have accessibility to the facilities where we run those programs on site as well. And to give you a bit of scope in terms of different areas that we've sort of looked at, from our parking out front, a lot of users coming in throughout the centre, so we've actually changed the layout of that, how you access into the centre, where our disabled parking is in, even our drop-off areas, so they're nice and close to reception, and making sure we're meeting those specs in terms of guidelines from an accessibility point of view. Making sure our entranceways and pathways to our different facilities flow through, so there's no impeding. In terms of bathroom accessibility, making sure, because we've got a lot of capacity here, we need to make sure we have those facilities that are conducive to support everyone using the facility. And accommodations, we actually have 292 beds here, which we have different user groups, from school groups to grassroots sports family reunions, to performance pathways, you know, those going to state, national, and Olympics. So we do have quite a few para athlete or sports come to the centre to utilise our facility. So very diverse. So we do have 2 accessible lodges here to support those programs on site as well. Yeah, trackside bistro, we do have a upstairs for our groups to eat. So we want to make sure there's flow, even in how our dining area is set up and laid out. It's very important when we know a group needs certain, you know, accessibility criteria, we make sure that's met. Facilities, we've got a lot of facilities here. So I'm going to name a few. We've got a track and field stadium, international standard IAAF. We've got the Nicky Hudson Hockey Centre, which is an international standard hockey field. A 50-metre pool, which is right in front of me outside my office, which I'm very fortunate to have. Indoor 20-metre pool. We've got a gym with a high performance area too for groups to use, aerobics room. So we've got a lot of different facilities that we want to make sure there's flow, and that every person that comes to the centre has some, you know, can access those facilities when they're here. And we've even incorporated through that journey, like the track and field, when we got that renovated. You know, we had New Zealand athletics, para-athletics come over for a training camp, and one of the athletes was wheelchair bound and was a thrower. And so that was unique. We hadn't had a thrower come in, so we made sure we discussed with them. So there's a lot of consultation with the groups that come through to make sure when they get here, they have everything they need, whether that's equipment, setup, support on site as well, we offer. And we ended up, you know, changing the in terms of tie down, setting them up on our throws area to make sure when they get here, everything is ready for them to go. Even the Nicky Hudson Hockey Centre, we never had a hockey field on site. Like, I've been here 13 years, and you know, we're lucky that was gifted during the Commonwealth Games where we had a hockey field. But one thing we noticed straight away is how do we get people accessing the hockey field with the dugouts in there, with the watering? And then we ended up straight away, because we run a lot of our educational programs on there as well. And we do want, in terms of hockey's growth, is actually to have accessible facilities for those to participate in the sport. So we actually purchased a ramp to make sure there was no issues from that perspective. So, and that supported a lot of the programs that we'll run on site. We also have conference facilities set up, which are fully equipped, wheelchair accessible, signage in terms of directional signage, and symbols and so forth. And we do have specific emergency evacuation strategies and plans in place. Being a big site, you know, we need to make sure we're covering all bases. So I guess that gives you sort of a bit of a insight in some of the things we've tried to work on to create a more inclusive and accessible space for our guests and our members visiting the centre.
And consulting and co-design is an absolute key and essential component into what you're doing. And can you just talk a bit about how that leads to a more successful outcome, I guess, than if you hadn't have gone through that process?
Definitely. Like, we from a staff perspective, like I said, most of our staff are able-bodied. We need to consult with those who are visiting us, the centre. Like, that's why I approached Adam and Tash to sort of train our staff, and even the words that we use, and talking about accessibility and how that works. So it was great insight for us. We even worked with Destination Gold Coast, had a bit of a mentoring and audit process in terms of accessibility. Like, you know, we should have information off our website in terms of accessibility and information that we provide. So it's given us a lot more insight in terms of our different facilities, what we need. And, you know, talking about the 20-metre pool, making sure we have a hoist there to get people into the pool, and just with the clientele and the users that use the centre. So it's very, very crucial. Like, we hosted the Para National Football Championships last year here. You know, there were things they needed in terms of setup, moving to each location. You know, in terms of accessibility, there was a diverse range of needs required. So without that consultation, you know, we probably couldn't have supported a successful event without us actually liaising with them, because then we'll be running a little bit blind. So yeah, it's helped us on numerous occasions. So yeah, consultation is very important with our stakeholders, and especially we're actually looking into a master plan we've done surveys to hit every single stakeholder we know that uses the facility. So when we have the opportunity to redesign the centre, we do it right to support those groups.
Were there any challenges you faced that you just didn't expect, that there was something, that was sort of left of centre, I guess, that you just weren't expecting that came up?
Yeah, in terms of challenges, like, I'll give you a couple of examples, like with the gym, just the layout of the gym, where the way it was laid out before, because we've just renovated it. We made sure we consulted with people, but in terms of accessibility with a certain equipment, trying to access it, we noticed that was an issue, and that's come back from feedback with our members. So we wanted to make sure we had that design right. I think that new gym was in June, July last year. So, making, in terms of wheelchair accessible, that you can actually access all the equipment we have on site. So, pool lanes, accessibility from that perspective, a lot of our groups and clientele and the demand and ease of access into the pool, we've got to be very mindful of that. Can be challenging at times, especially when you're working with different groups at different levels, whether that's from community to high performance, but accessibility is something we need to make it work for those, especially when we have para athletes coming here on site, or whether that's our members' access. We need to have a system in place to make sure that we are on top of it and making sure everyone's looked after in terms of access to the pool. Challenges definitely with major events. Some events we might have the athletic stadium book, the hockey stadium book, which had happened recently last year. We were at the para football championships on site. We had hockey at the back with the Hockey Australia Masters event on, going at the same time. We had another event in the pool. So, from our parking area, it can be quite tricky. It's not as accessible as it should be. So trying to come up with ways, especially from a capacity point of view, when you've got that many people on site, to make sure we've got plans and contingencies in place. And I think from a master plan perspective, something we definitely need to work on a bit better, and that's what we're sort of addressing moving forward into the future. And just making sure we're liaising with those groups that do stay on site. And that, we do have some groups that don't give us the full picture of who's coming and what needs are required until they get here. So we just make sure that we're flexible to make changes when we need to. Especially with our lodges, we are restricted with, with bookings with the capacity that we can hold from an accessibility point of view. Out of the 292 beds, we've only got, the 9 lodges, only 2 lodges are accessible. So sometimes we have to make modifications where we've got certain bunk beds that we might convert to twin beds to make sure, you can access and get a good night's rest, and there's not anything impeding your experience here at the centre. So flexibility is definitely key from that perspective. It gives you a few sort of ideas and challenges that we work with. And then definitely notice with memberships, like 2,800 people coming through the centre. There's a lot of people, a lot of traffic coming through. One thing we have implemented is there's a few things, like even from a carer point of view, we offer free carer memberships for those that need support, so they can come in and support those who need it. Do inductions. We're fully staffed in the gym, so if they need help with any of that side of things, we make sure we have someone available for those inductions. And we do track if we know someone that needs certain requirements when coming in. We do keep a record of it. We make sure that's communicated. So that can be challenging at times because we've got different staff coming in and out. So we just need to try and, make sure that that's communicated to all our staff, so they're aware of certain members or guest needs when they come to prior to them coming in, just so they're aware. So communication internally, it can be a challenge at times, but it's something where we pride ourselves and make sure we do that well.
And what are some of the results you've seen from incorporating access and inclusion into the centre?
To be honest, our director is Brendan Flynn. He was actually former CEO of the Australian Paralympic Committee in 2000. he's been a big driver of inclusiveness and accessibility at the centre. And probably from 2013 to 2014, we have seen an increase, especially working on the certain areas that we need to, of especially para athletes coming to the centre, and definitely with our school groups coming through the centre in terms of school programs. You know, our activities are able to cater for everyone who comes to the centre, whether that's visual impairment, you know, mobility issues, wheelchair accessibility. We make sure, like our principals drafted lesson plans that work for everyone to accommodate. You know, through our membership base, we've seen a lot more come through in terms of visual impairments. We've got a few that have been here for, like, you know, 9 years, 16 years, 21 years, physical impairments, wheelchair accessibility. So yeah, definitely noticed from that perspective, seen a lot more come through the centre from a membership's point of view. And we've seen a lot more, I guess, events like I was talking about earlier. We had 200 athletes for the National Para Football Championships, which is very exciting. Yeah, so I've got a whole list of different para teams. I won't go over all of them, but we've definitely noticed from that perspective an influx, especially when we've communicated with them a lot, just as we've improved over the years. We have noticed a lot more coming to the centre. Now, we had the Victus Games swimming camp, Virtus Games triathlon, Special Olympics junior team came here pre-camp. You know, at the moment, we've got Solomon and White Islands athletics here, who are para athletes on site. So we make sure we liaise with them to make sure they've got what they need on site. Wheelchair rugby team, pre-camp before Rio. So yeah, it gives you a bit of an idea. So you definitely increase in para-athlete utilisation of the centre. Understanding from our general membership population that the athletes are normal that come to the centre. So I guess important for members without impairment to understand and be able to visualise what our impaired athletes are achieving. Yeah, provides community awareness, you know. Yeah, and probably a big thing we get out of this, which are the wow moments. You know, like I'll give you an example. We had Japanese para athletics on site. I think it was a couple of years ago, and with Chris Nunn. And one of the para athletes actually had a similar impairment or disability as one of our students who were on site. So we actually organised a meeting for them to meet together and chat, and just seeing the glow on her face with that interaction to see where you can strive to be. And it just gave this little student just inspiration moving forward. So those little wow moments that we get to see, oh, it's worth it.
And yeah, it's very much, if you see it, you can be it. So when people with disability see other people doing sport, then they know they can.
Definitely. And even with our AITCAP, you know, we incorporate more, you know, in terms of wheelchair races and incorporating different programs. And we've still got a lot of work to do from our end, but we really want to push for inclusiveness and accessibility in terms of the events that we personally run as a centre. So yeah, it's very much a priority for us.
I'm going to throw this open to everyone, but I'll probably start we'll get Adam's response to this. If you could make one change to how businesses approach accessibility, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's really, really that simple. I think there's a perception out there that people don't want to be asked questions, or, you know, and that stops a lot of communication. I think ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Sure, you know, there are people out there that, you know, will take questions the wrong way, and I think that's with human nature in general. But it's really that simple. It's about asking questions. It's about asking that question: what can I do to make this possible for you, or to help you make this happen? Yeah, it's really that simple.
And I think we as people with disability understand, you know, you don't know everything, and, you know, if it's approached in the right way, we're more than happy to
100%.
answer questions. There shouldn't be a fear behind it.
100%, and we find that more and more. I mean, even going out into a shopping center, you know, you'll have little kids. I have little kids go past me and go, you know, hey, look, mum, there's a man in a wheelchair, and you know, the parent will grab the child and, you know, try and run away with them, and it's like, that's not what we want. That I'm the parent myself. I've got a 6-year-old, and you know, that's not what I want. I want kids to be curious, and you know, so you know, whether it be kids or whether it be adults, questions are a great thing. You know, as humans, we're curious people. You know, humans are curious by nature. So I guess is what I'm trying to say there.
Mike or Ranfurly, did you have anything?
Yeah,
that you-
actually, something that's been really great working with people like Adam is, and you know, from an able person point of view, it's great to understand that it's not necessarily rude to ask these kind of questions, and actually just to be straight up and find, and just almost in some ways be blunt and find out what is that answer, like what is it that we need to do to make this experience better for more people. And the only way to find it out is just to be straight up front with anybody that you can ask a question to. And just the opportunity to learn so much from people like Adam, especially, who I've had a lot of interaction with, has been a really great experience. And if I could also go back to what Ranfurly was saying about you know, the events they're running and getting more participants in this event. And I don't want this to kind of come across as being insensitive, but from a marketing and a business point of view, it's another sales vertical for us, is our accessibility. And if more businesses realize that what we're talking about here essentially is just reaching more customers. And you can't, as a business, I'm not the owner of the business, but as a business owner, you can't argue with that idea that we can increase our customer base if we just do these little things, you know?
And with people with disabilities, about 20% of the population, that's a big chunk you are
It's
cutting out of
huge.
your customer base if you're not willing
Exactly.
to be open to be inclusive.
Absolutely. From Josh.
Can I chime in there for a second, Julia?
Of course.
Yeah, I was just going to say, as Mike just, you know, started to say, you know, that with 20% of our population identifying us as having some form of disability, you know, for a business, that's potentially, like Mike was saying, you know, that's 20%. If you're not a business that's not thinking about accessibility inclusion, that's a 20% demographic that you're not even touching, like you're not going near. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with both, especially in terms of the asking the questions. Don't be afraid to do it. Like, I have had staff that didn't know how to approach it, and you know, we learned that from Adam and Tash, that's for sure. And we wouldn't be able to run some of the events we've run without answering questions. It would have been a catastrophe if we didn't ask questions, I'm going to be honest. So yeah, I've had really good interactions with most people, what most events we've had here, and that they wouldn't have been a success if we weren't asking questions. So yeah, and definitely 20% from a business perspective. You know, we talk about the wow moments, but yeah, what we've definitely noticed an increase from a memberships point of view and from an events and accommodation point of view. And to be honest, we just want to make sure that we don't put up any barriers for people to access the centre. You know, we want to minimise those barriers as much as we can.
And I think too, if people start thinking it as removing barriers rather than being accessible, it's sort of, you're removing something rather than people think being accessible, you know, you have to add things and things. But if you talk about removing, then it's a different mind shift.
I think almost like a counter argument, I can sympathize with a business that, you know, the building has been built in a previous decade, and you know, the investment that they would have to put into creating accessibility is something that, from my point of view, I'd never have to deal with. And, you know, luckily we, you know, our buildings are all accessible and everything, but I guess, are there grants and things that businesses have access to assist with that stuff, or?
There are, we've seen some increasing grants being instituted, so hopefully that's going to improve more. I know, so I'm down here in Victoria, and the last 2 years the Victorian government has run a Changing Places grant.
Yeah.
So it's there. It's, yeah, finding it and applying, as we all know, it's time and resources, but there's definitely help out there.
Do you think that's an awareness thing for business owners, that they need more awareness that that is something they could get access to?
I think that's a really great point. I mean, that's part of why we do what we do, and we run the conferences, so people, businesses are becoming more aware, and the momentum is shifting. We've seen in the last 6 to 12 months, like, you know, not a huge shift, but things are shifting, which has been really, really good to see.
It's great to hear.
Speaking of expensive things, what are some of the very simple, low-cost things that you have done that you have seen have made a big impact? Because sometimes it's not big, expensive renovations that do make the difference.
I would come back to the conversations that, you know, we have with our customer service and instructors. Like, it costs nothing other than potentially an hour's worth of wage for an individual employee, just to improve the level of customer service and the awareness that that person has. And I don't, you know, I think these lessons shouldn't just be given in the context of an employee working for a business. These are lessons that should be taught way before somebody even reaches employment. Like,
and staff training within a business is something that happens anyway, whether it be disability training or whatever. I mean, that's just a natural part of business, is training your staff.
that's right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the training has been very beneficial for us. Just that awareness side of things moving forward, and it improves our customer service approach discussions and events or groups that are coming on site, and how we can better cater. Yeah, I think training's been one of the biggest beneficial things for us. And it's a good point with, you know, with the centre. We weren't here 20 years ago when it was built. Been here 13 years. It's a hard structure, but there have been little things we've able to tweak, like I said, with the hockey field, with incorporating a ramp that's movable, that we can set up out there. It's a low cost. Even the inlets, and setting up for our para athletes coming in, or rejigging our lodges. Like, you know, we've had occasions we've pulled out beds and put in other beds. It's, you know what I mean? Like, it's, we're able to adapt and be flexible. So, you know, little things like that make a big difference.
We've had some questions start to come through on the chat, so I might start asking them. But if anybody in the room would like to ask a question, if you put your hand up. So Josh asks, what accessible transportation options are available on the Gold Coast? Adam, you might be the person to ask.
Yeah, so I was going to say I'm happy to talk to that one. So all of the to my understanding, all of the buses are accessible. They all have ramps. They're all wheelchair accessible. Most of them generally have, I believe, 2 or 3 spots for wheelchair access. I remember probably 20 years ago, it was a matter of ringing the bus company first and saying, I want to go on this bus at this time. Can you make sure it's an accessible bus? But you also had to give them a week's notice. These days, yeah, my understanding is it's pretty much all of them now. I know there's a lot of interstate or longer travel bus services. Greyhound, as an example, have accessible buses as well. We're lucky that we have a really good train and tram network that runs from Brisbane to the Gold Coast, and the tram network that runs through some of the Gold Coast as well. And I know that they're looking at expanding that So that's a really great way of getting around the coast as well, and really accessible.
And I know we heard a comment from Jason Thomas at Destination Gold Coast that mentioned the Hoppo Ferry is also accessible.
Yeah, I jumped on the Hoppo ferry last week. Actually, it was I'll admit it was actually my first time, but I wanted to experience it and see what it was like, and it was fantastic. The staff member that was on the boat was great, really helpful, and it's really good. It's a really good experience getting on, getting off. Yeah.
So for those of us not familiar with the Gold Coast, where does the Hoppo Ferry go and land?
So the Hoppo ferry you can get from, you'll be testing my knowledge here, but you can go Southport into Marina Mirage, so around the SeaWorld area, that sort of thing. Also goes into Hotter, which is home of the arts in Bundall. So art galleries, really nice cafe there. Obviously stage shows and things like that. And yeah, Surfers Paradise, I believe as well. I think off the top of my head, that's all I remember. But yeah, it does a bit of that end of the coast.
And just a comment I saw from Kate, which relates back to the question we were talking about grants, Mike. Queensland is due any day now to announce the Accessible Tourism Queensland Fund that will support small to medium tourism and events business to develop and enhance accessibility for people of all abilities. So there's definitely grants coming. We have a question from Gina from the Southport Sharks. We're speaking about venue design and accessibility, which has been awesome. Do you have any advice for venues that have a constant change of layout or floor plan such as event centres?
I'll just throw my bit in there. Make sure you've got a ramp to the stage. That's a key one. And also, whether it be for wheelchairs, wheelie walkers, prams, people using crutches, make sure there's enough space within the room for a mobility device to traverse. Would be, as far as mobility devices are concerned, would be one.
Right. Does anyone else have any questions they want to ask? While we're waiting, I actually have one for you, Adam.
Sure.
Can you share some of your favorite places that sort of exemplify accessible and inclusive at the Gold Coast, given that, most of the getaboutable team's coming up in just over a month, and we're interested to see what's going on up there and what we can do.
Excellent. Look, there's I got to start with iFly, obviously, because it really is. It's a brilliant experience. So highly recommend that. The team, as Ranfurly was saying, the team at Gold Coast Performance Centre is great, and if you're looking for a gym or that sort of thing, that's a great experience. Hotter's really good. The theme parks are a lot better than they used to be. When you go to a theme park now, for me as somebody with a physical disability, they'll send you off to the first aid, and you'll get a card, and basically that tells you what rides you can and what things you can and can't do, what experiences. And I've sort of learnt from that. That's the ride manufacturer's guidelines more than the theme park themselves saying we're not letting you on that ride. That's actually the manufacturer's guidelines. It was actually really interesting being going to the theme parks on the Gold Coast for a long time. And last year I've always been a paraplegic, always been a wheelchair user, but last year I underwent bilateral leg amputation. And I honestly didn't think that would be a big deal for me. But when I got to the theme parks, it actually changed quite a lot of the different rides and things that I could go on. But yeah, so Hotter, The theme parks, as I say, do it really well. We're also really lucky here that we have some really beautiful natural parklands and things like that right on the waterfront. Great accessible places if fishing's your thing. We also have the beach access mats that go down from a number of places on the Gold Coast. Unfortunately, they're only on certain days at certain times. We haven't quite got to the point where they're down all the time, all day, every day, but we're working on that.
How about the restaurants and bars?
Restaurants and bars, look, there's plenty of them. We have the issue with restaurants and bars, and it's an age-old issue of trying to get as many bums in seats into restaurants and bars as possible, which from a mobility device user's perspective creates an issue in that when I go into a place, I want to choose where I sit. I don't want to be told where I can sit because of where I can fit. But certainly, as far as restaurants and bars, there's a great seafood place along the waterfront at Labrador there, Charis, which is great. It's got a good ramp going into it. There's plenty of space in there. Through Surfers Paradise, there's some great cafes and restaurants. TGI Fridays is brand new, and it's really good and accessible. Bars, there's the Grand Hotel. Like I said, TGI Fridays is good for a drink. There's lots of good places around are accessible. Q1 is if you're not too afraid of heights, Q1's a really good one as well. You can go up to the sky deck on level 77 and go sit up there and check out the Gold Coast view and have a beverage and a bite to eat while you're there.
Yeah, that's definitely on my list to do. That and Nahoda are sort of getting to top of the list. We're sort of running out of time, so we might take one more question from Adrian, because we also have a fantastic video to show as we end. But what is your advice for businesses and venues that are just starting out on the journey to become more accessible and inclusive?
My advice is seek real world advice. Talk to somebody with a disability. The guidelines are great and the guidelines go a long way, but there are gaps in guidelines. And quite often, when I go into a business, myself and my business partner, or Tash, as Ranfurly was saying, we'll go into a business and we'll talk to a business. And the biggest concern for people is cost, but there are so many things that business can do. Threshold ramps and things as simple as furniture placement. So, not making places too, areas too crowded. Make sure there's enough room for people that use mobility devices to get around. Think about people with visual impairments as far as steps and drop downs are concerned as well. Things like that are a really, really good start. But just find somebody who's you can have a chat to and is willing to come in and have a look.
Ranfurly or Mike, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, exactly what Adam said. I think is just ask the questions. Don't be afraid to start the journey. You're probably going to make some mistakes along the way, and that's fine. But in the long run, it's beneficial for everyone. For the individual staff member, for the business balance sheet, and for the potential customers coming through. Just at some point, just start the journey. Just take little baby steps. It just needs to be one thing at a time.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely talking to your stakeholders and users of your facility. That's our members coming through. We want to get their perspective of how they can improve their experience. And we've done surveys and stakeholder engagement meetings with them. And the simple things of furniture placements. There's a lot you can do to support them, and even processes that you have on site to better accommodate in terms of inclusiveness and accessibility. So yeah, definitely getting feedback from your those stakeholders using your facility. Talking to real people has been it's a game changer.
Well, our time's pretty much up, and I want to thank Adam, Ranfurly, and Mike for their time today, and everyone joining us. I hope you got something useful out of it today. I think there was a lot of great tips coming out of today. If you are interested in learning more, our Accessible and Inclusive Tourism Conference is a great place to start. And in 2023, we're a hybrid event with one day on the Gold Coast on the 28th of April and our virtual event on the 11th of May. We have actually just revealed the virtual program on the website, and we should be releasing the Gold Coast program very, very soon. So you can check that out on our website, which is being popped into the chat. And also that's where you can register and buy tickets. And if you can't wait till April, you can also purchase access to the last fantastic 2 years of content that we've done. If you want to keep connecting and keep the conversation going, there's also our AITCAP Facebook group and Getaboutable Travelers community group, where members are encouraged to ask questions, share knowledge, and we welcome you to join. All the links we've been talking about we'll be putting in the chat box, and a fully captioned recording of this webinar will be available online soon. I'm really excited to be able to spend some time on the Gold Coast and explore all the accessible and inclusive things it has to offer, and I really hope you'll join us there. But today we are going to end with a video from City of Gold Coast that I think really showcases all the great work they've been doing to make the city inclusive for everyone.
The City of Gold Coast is a leader in access and inclusion. We are proud to have hosted an inclusive GC 2018. We are building our reputation as an accessible tourism destination with world-class facilities. 3 changing places toilet facilities have been installed. Mobility maps have been developed for 4 key precincts. Beach access equipment is now available at 10 locations across the Gold Coast. Over 100 Gold Coast business and tourism operators attended the city's Accessible Tourism Forum. We strive to exceed minimum compliance requirements. Our key precincts and community facilities will meet the needs of all residents and visitors into the future. From 2014 to 2019, we have been working to enhance the lifestyle and well-being of residents and visitors of all ages and abilities. From 2014 to 2019, the city's assisted bin service has supported over 350 residents to move their bins to and from the curbside. Over $8 million has been invested in improving access to pedestrian, parking and public transport assets. Assistive equipment and adaptive technology is available at all city libraries, including portable hearing loops. 12 free-to-use recharge points have been installed in libraries and community centres. Over 1,500 residents are members of City Library's Special Needs Collection. Over the past 5 years, members have borrowed approximately 35,700 items. Over 4,400 mobility maps have been distributed to residents and visitors. 15 timed pedestrian signalised crossings have been installed. More than 2,000 residents are registered for the city's council cab service. Accessible beach showers are now available at 7 locations. From 2014 to 2019, over $7 million has been invested in new or upgraded public toilets and barbecues. 4 fully accessible and 6 easy access accommodation options are now available at Gold Coast tourist parks. We've made it easier than ever for residents to engage with the city and get information. This is just the beginning of the story. The City of Gold Coast is committed to creating an accessible and inclusive community for everyone.
Hi, Mayor Tom Tate here. On the Gold Coast, we don't leave anyone behind. This is why we are working hard to create an accessible city where everyone's included. Improving and enhancing accessibility throughout the city is an important focus for us. We are spending millions of dollars each year on accessibility, including beach access, mobility maps, bus stops, pathways, and new changing places, toilet facilities. We want to make sure we continue to meet the needs of residents and visitors into the future.
For more information about the city's access and inclusion initiatives, visit our website cityofgoldcoast.com.au/inclusion.
Yay for captions. Yes, thank you everyone for joining us. I'll also pop a link to that video in the chat box, so if you, or in the follow-up email to the event, so if you do want to hear what they're saying. And have a great afternoon, everyone.